And Ronnie, 5, 4, 3, 2, and go.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to The Solution. Nothing changes if we change nothing. Well, hi, everybody. How's it going?
I'm good. I'm chilling. Sun's out. It's cold out, but the sun's out. Like that's the most important part to me. I think. I don't think the weather matters. The temperature, well, it kind of does.
Mhm.
But as long as the sun is out, like I'm happy. Do I hear
Yes.
laughter? Who's that? Who's that laughter that we
Hey,
that we hear?
wait, I think I
Yeah.
see another person among us. It's not just you and
Yeah,
me anymore, Shavar.
exactly. No, it's not. It's me. My name is Nanor, and I'm the newest member in New York City Prevention Resource Center. And I'm very glad to be here and on the podcast of the solution. I'm the new development specialist. Yeah, community. I'm sorry,
We'll
guys.
take it. We'll
Nah,
take it.
it's okay. Listen, when I first
I'm
started, I was like,
gonna-
it was a mouthful. I'm like, New York City, Community
yeah.
Development. I'm like, I would forget Prevention Resource Center. Don't worry, it happened. So it's a
Okay,
lot to
sometimes
say.
saying PRC it's easier. Yeah, it's like okay.
NYC, PRC. And
But yeah.
yes, and you're the new community development specialist.
Yeah, very excited to be here and on this podcast as well.
Well, we're very excited to
Thank
have you.
you.
And we waited a long time to be able to hire
hmm
someone, and Nanora's hit the ground running. I mean, we're really moving forward very quickly. But we've taken a break here. This is our first podcast, what, in about 2.5, 3 weeks now?
About 2.5 weeks. Yeah,
Oh
it's
wow.
been a while.
Yeah.
hmm
We try to do a podcast the day after the election, but we were both in such shock that we had trouble talking.
Yeah,
And
it
also
was a
things were so up in the air.
yeah. Well, still are. Well, they shouldn't be, but they still are.
I know this has
That's
been a
right.
crazy, crazy time. But hopefully things will move forward. And
hmm
I'm looking forward to seeing, more funding for the prevention world through
Absolutely.
this. I mean, it continued through the current administration. I won't say any names, but I'd like to see a more assertive effort by the administration to really put funds in there to make them available to coalitions, to programs, and
hmm
hopefully there'll be a better shot at that now. We fought for every dollar we've gotten over the last few years.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just. I was just while you were talking, I was like, wow. I mean, you're not that much older than we are, Ronnie. I'm going to say that because you like to say you're old when you're not old. Um, this is history. You've been through some history, and
Hmm.
you continue to be a part of history. Seeing what we're going through now with our election, not only with our election, the pandemic that we're going through, how schools. My son is home because schools are now closed, so I'm not sure when he will ever go back to school. If there's an in-person school
Hmm.
year, this might be it until September of next year.
Maybe.
And so this is history. Like how
This is true.
like definitely when you look back in when our children or grandchildren or relatives look back in the
Mhm.
history books, we were there. We
Yeah,
were
we lived
there.
it. We're living it.
We're
And
definitely living.
I was thinking that this morning too. It's funny, it's a common theme, but thinking, wow, we are living through a pandemic. I mean, look, I'm not saying I'm not old, I'm wizened. Okay.
Thank
I'm
you, thank you,
experienced.
thank
But
you. I'd
I'm
rather
I
you
mean,
say that.
I've been around for 68 years, and during that time I've never seen anything like this. This is a historical time. And a friend of mine who I love dearly from Maine, a friend of mine, David, who was a spiritual giant. I always say that about him. He is an incredible person. He's into Kabbalah. He used to be a Catholic priest. I mean, the guy is just a spiritual giant. And he
Mm,
said these are very interesting and exciting times. And I had to think about that. I wrote back to him. I said,
it is.
yes, I'm open to that, but they're also very scary and stressful. But what would be interesting and exciting? What could, I mean, we always look at the scary part, but if we had to look at something positive to come out of all of this, what are some things that might be?
Oh wow! I mean, I'm gonna go on a humorous route, and because you said what
Mm.
you said, um, I recently started watching TikTok, and I'm addicted to TikTok. Oh my god, it's like I need prevention for that. But anyway, there, there's this TikToker. I think his name is like Ronnie Live or something or whatever, and he plays this role of like these. He plays three different characters. He'll play like God and angel and what have you. So anyway, I'm gonna fast forward. He played this. He did this one skit where it's like. The angel Gabriel is talking to Lucifer, and he says, "Lucifer, do everything for the 2020s. And Lucifer goes, yeah, I did everything for 2000. Did you say 2020s? He put everything in. So everything we're experiencing now, we're supposed to be spread out over the entire decade opposed to just 1 year. So Lucifer put everything in 1 year. So that's the humorous route. I mean, I have to take at it because, like you said, this so in 1 year, like I actually learned a term, early in the year where it's called syndemic, which is multiple pandemics. So I was like, oh, and that's what we're experiencing. We're experiencing, whether it's COVID, I'm losing crises right now. But we at that point we had different pandemics happening simultaneously. I'm like, wow, to live in this time, and I actually did a humorous podcast called Extinction Level Event. It was pretty much based on this premise, like how do you deal with pandemics? How do you deal with this zombie apocalypse? I just wanted to have fun. I just wanted to get rid of the whole everyone stuck in the house. How do you deal with alien invasion? How do you deal with an animal uprising? So like, how do you, I just wanted to have fun with it because
the rise of the machines.
Exactly. Yeah, actually that was our call to our question to the our listeners. Hey, how would you deal with the rise of machines?
Yeah.
So definitely, I think for me the positive is trying to find the humor in it all, and if that helps.
Yeah,
definitely. I think for me it was spending more time with my family. Oh, and I increased my baking skills and cooking skills, which is good. My mom is so proud.
What are you making for us when we return to the office?
Well, my specialty is chocolate chip cookies. It's very simple, but it's very good.
Oh yeah, you can't go bad with those.
Yeah, I was gonna say you can't go bad with a classic chocolate chip cookie. You cannot go bad with that.
Yeah.
I mean, I would agree with also Nanor family, because like I mentioned in previous episodes how we use Zoom to stay connected. At one point my mother was doing cooking lessons for all my younger cousins and what have you, and and two of my cousins did painting classes with us. So we use Zoom to stay connected because we can't see each other. So it was like, hey, so I agree with you, Nanor family, getting more connected to my family.
Yeah.
And I also think the pace of life, it's always very fast. So this pandemic made us realize, like, to take, to step on the brake and realize what we need to be grateful about, and to see our surroundings and how we live and why we actually living it and the purpose of it. Well, sometimes I'm very grateful though.
I think gratitude has been the first and foremost for me. A year ago, last November, every November I post on social media what I'm grateful for a month. Well, I started last November. I never stopped, and I've started to develop kind of a following among people that I know in groups and friends for my gratitude posts. People have said how much it's helped them kind of climb out of their doldrum. For me, if I'm grateful, if I'm within an attitude of gratitude, it's very hard for me to sink lower. I have to keep coming back. It's like my life raft. And I come back and I cling to that. So, I mean, there have been positive things. This is one of them. We thought outside the box. We said, how can we get the message of prevention out there without being in person? And we've reinvented what we do, and it's thriving. It's so cool. We've got NYC Pop, New York City Partners of Prevention, where we post Thursdays and Fridays with 15 coalitions and other partners around the city. And that's growing and getting stronger. I mean, who would we have thought of this if we weren't all home?
I don't know if we wouldn't have even had the time, because a lot of the work we do is travel when we're going to coalitions and meetings and so forth. It's always travel. So it's like, when will we find the time? Like, we have, I think it's a jam packed. When this first started, I said, Ronnie, what are we going to do in the summer? And dude, from the top of the morning to the end of the day, it was filled. Like it was we were busy, man. Like, the podcast, NYC Pop, and I'm looking for the third initiative. And also we did way more trainings.
Yeah. Hello, everybody.
Of course,
well, guess what?
Talking.
You're in the middle. Chevar's in the middle of talking. Surprise! And we have guests come. As you can see, we have two guests today. I'm very excited. One's a returning guest. welcome, and we'd like to introduce you in a moment to our newest team member. But in the meantime, could each of you introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Sure thing.
Oh, go ahead, Ashley. Go.
Hi. Venus and I got a good vibe going on. We work together. Hi, I am Ashley Owen. I am the team leader, one of the team leaders for the New York City Problem Gambling Resource Center. I work mainly in Staten Island and Brooklyn. And my role for the PGRC is just to help spread awareness in communities throughout Staten Island and Brooklyn that we are here, and talk to community leaders and people who, any real leaders or stakeholders or residents who know about gambling in the community. Since we don't have any kind of quantitative data about what kind of gambling is going on locally, we rely on a lot of qualitative information from anybody who is the boots on the ground in various communities. So basically making relationships, getting information about gambling, letting people know that our resources are here, and doing trainings to anyone and everyone who wants to learn a little bit more about problem gambling. We have both problem gambling 101 general overview trainings, and then some trainings that are more specific to certain populations or issues. So that is most of what I do for the PGRC. Venus?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having us. My name is Venus Moore. I work for the New York City Problem Gambling Resource Center. I work along with Ashley. As you can see, she's my better half. We work very, very
Wait, I thought I was.
I'm sorry, Ronni. You know how I am. I love people, and
I'm kidding you, cuz.
I love being around positive people, and Ashley is one of my teammates. We do pretty much the same thing. I'm more primarily in the Bronx. However, I'm here to assist her. She does Staten Island and southern parts of Brooklyn. And so we're just here to, promote awareness, educate about problem gambling and the effects that it has on the community.
Cool.
I just want to say hello to Ashley. I haven't seen you in months. Say, hey, Ashley. I'm sorry. I know I changed the podcast really quickly. It's been a while. It's been months. Good to see you again.
Yes, likewise.
Back to the program.
I got to see her at 2 weeks ago, or at the SBCC meeting. But as you can see, we have a new person. So Nanor, say hello to Venus and Ashley.
Hey guys, my name is Nanor and I'm the newest member of the PRC. It's very good to meet you guys.
Likewise.
Yeah, we're excited. And we were just talking about some of the positive things that have come out of this whole crazy pandemic in 2020 and the historical implication. I mean, we got a little philosophical before you got here. But I'm curious, and I think, we've talked, when I see you, we talk about this is, what have you guys been doing during this time to adapt your work, and what are you seeing?
Well, I guess I'll start because Ashley will clean me up. That's my better half. So we have actually transitioned to do a lot of remote outreach, as every CBO or every organization, especially during this time. So we've been doing a lot of trainings. We have been trying to be, very creative and doing a lot of emergent trend trainings, reaching out to partners, still trying to gather research. However, it is a little difficult, especially in my region, the Bronx, because there are so many other, issues that is, poverty, just school issues, with the remote learning and stuff like that, just community issues, I'll say, just to put it nicely. A lot of people are in a state of panic. A lot of people are in a state of unknown. And so what we're trying to do is really just reach out to the community and really just let them know that we are a resource. We understand that people are gambling more because, they're trying to escape. So there's people who have never participated in gambling or scratch offs or, sports betting or certain things like that. who are now, going in that direction, especially with the internet gambling and the online betting, especially because people are indoors now because of COVID. What I've been seeing, a lot of Facebook groups, they have their own, I call them number hole, virtual number holes. So there's been some gambling on Facebook as well. So we're just trying to be a resource to people and just let them know, like, listen, we take a neutral stance. We're not saying not to gamble. However, what we're saying is that we are here to help you. And if you need treatment, just call on us and we can help you.
Yeah, I was looking at some articles earlier. I guess you expected there to be a spike in online gambling because people had a transition. People who normally would go and gamble in person had to find another outlet. And then we didn't have sports for a while. So, but I was reading that they've seen like a 30 to 40% rise overall in online, gambling and issues with young adults. And it's just, I can't even imagine what that would be like to have that at your fingertips, because there's nothing to stop anybody. And it's not like they're really monitoring it in the way you can in person.
Yeah.
So that's scary. Yeah, scary stuff. Are you seeing the same thing pretty much, Ashley?
Definitely similar trends. And I think even prior to the pandemic, there was an increase in forms of online gambling. And I think what the pandemic did was basically just accelerate that increase. And one of the things that's tricky about understanding gambling, especially if you are in like the position Venus and I in, where we're really trying to look at it like from a macro scope in our communities, one of the tricky things is it's a behavior that can be really easily hidden. Like it's called, I'm sure you've heard us refer to it at this nickname before, but like the hidden addiction, right? Because think about it, if you have a problem with chemical dependency, at some point, intoxication becomes more visible, right? It's something that can be detected a little bit easier. You have things like, drug screens that can pick it up, whereas gambling, I could have placed a really risky bet 10 minutes before getting on this call and nobody would know. Right. So I think the fact that people are now having less physical interaction with one another and less like physical time in public places, like observing people gambling, I think one thing that's really challenging is really having an accurate picture of the type of gambling that is going on, because it was hidden to begin with and stigmatized in a lot of communities to begin with. And now it's even more hidden because of the distancing. So, on a local level, I've just been kind of checking in with stakeholders as much as I can and just, asking them if they hear about any kinds of gambling coming up, and also using all opportunities possible, like presentations, sending like infographics to stakeholders, like social media posts, like really kind of using every area possible to at least let people know about the warning signs, because some of the warning signs, you can still even if you're not seeing somebody regularly, you can still kind of pick up on them if you're in regular communication with them. So, that's really mainly been what we're doing, is just letting people know, like, if it, when problem gambling comes up, this is what it could look like. So if you hear somebody mentioning these things, and if it's somebody you're quarantined in the household with, maybe there are questions you can ask if you do notice them spending more time online, and if there's finances in the household that are unaccounted for. So it's definitely thrown a wrench in our programming. Community organizing is really tricky when you can't like physically be in the community, but I think we've been like as resilient and resourceful as possible, and I know a lot of our community partners have been too. So I think I can say, with integrity, that we are doing everything we can, and we're constantly thinking of what more we can do, in ways that we can be creative in getting out the word.
And we can attest to that because we see you at all of the coalitions we're at, and we hear about your different events. But you mentioned the signs, and you mentioned a couple of indicators. So I'm asking both of you, what should people be looking for? You know, you don't want anybody to be like on the constant hunt, but people need to be aware, if I see this in my family or my loved one or my friend, something could be going on. So what are some of those signs?
Sure. I'll start. One of them is pretty much when you neglect your responsibilities, and you concentrate on gambling activities. And so when you're denying, I guess let me say, let's say it like this, when you're denying your basic needs, food, shelter, you know, bills, to gamble, to find ways to escape. That's one way you can find out. And again, like Ashley said, it can be very hidden. Like, you know, I'm married. You know, if you have two different bank accounts, or if you're not sharing finances, that can easily happen, because if you're not talking to each other, if you don't have a shared bank account again. So just, you know, if you have someone who you see now is, and it's hard because of COVID, like who is constantly on their phone, you know, that's the new socialization right now. You know, everybody's on their phone. I'm caught in it as well. So I say, like, if you have someone who's constantly on their phone, if they're worried about numbers, if they're worried about, like, you know, watching certain games, or, you know, like what's happening, all of a sudden they have like an interest in basketball, or all of a sudden they have an interest in numbers. They have to, you know, just little different behaviors that's unexpected. You could definitely pick that up. But again, it is a hidden addiction. So, you know, like, unless it affects you directly, you're not going to know. So if you're not living with that person, like if you have an aunt, a cousin, you're really not going to know. And that's why it's really important just to stay connected to the family and have healthy alternatives.
Yeah.
Ashley can add on.
That was a good start, and really encompassed a lot of kind of like the core, you know, warning signs of what to look out for. You know, I think that one of the things, you know, when Venus was talking about one of the signs could be like engaging in gambling behavior, and a lot of that does look online right now, right? Like even like stock market apps like that, like the Robinhood, and like the apps where you can buy and trade stocks. That's something that I've heard in some Staten Island and Brooklyn communities being like becoming really, really prevalent, you know, during the pandemic. And, you know, the way gambling addiction works is, you know, I heard when I was first trained on this issue, I heard this comparison that has stuck with me ever since. And it's such a good way to describe it. It's the money is the drug and the risk is the high, right? And our trainings go into, you know, much more detail into how this works. But if you know, remember that concept, you know, with problem gambling, there is in many people a preoccupation with money, you know, particularly using money in a way that's placing bets, right? So they can get that dopamine rush in the brain when they place that risk. So there can be a preoccupation with money that can look similar to the way somebody who misuses alcohol has a preoccupation with alcohol, right? Or misuses drugs as a preoccupation with drugs. So I think that, you know, even if you're not able to, you know, observe the person's behavior, you know, if you notice that there is a preoccupation with money, you know, beyond what's expected, you know, given their situation. I mean, a lot of people do have have unfortunately had really tangible, you know, financial losses due to this pandemic. So a lot of people, you know, money is something that is understandably on people's minds. But I think, like more to Venus's point, if there is a preoccupation with constantly getting money that is beyond the scope, you know, of what you might, I mean, I hate this word, but I'm tempted to say normally, even though I don't want to. But you know, if you sense that, you know, there is a preoccupation with money that maybe you have not seen often before, you know, or heard that person have that level of preoccupation with before, and you know, another thing is, you know, looking to make money in a quick way, you know, that's something that is definitely could definitely be a red flag, or could be risky, for people who are already vulnerable, of developing a problem gambling. And that's like talking to people in the community, that's how a lot of times this behavior can get started is, okay, I need a quick way to make money, and another thing that I've heard problem gambling being referred to is, I've heard it being referred to a couple of times as like the disease of hope, right? And I know not everybody, views addictions in the I know that disease is not everybody's preferred terminology for addiction. But if you think of it, as something like, oh, wow, hope plays a role in this, right? And I think it makes people who are kind of hoping for that break, that financial break and some relief a little bit more vulnerable because unfortunately that hope, maybe distorts the perspective of the odds a little bit, and that's how a lot of people get hooked. So, that's how we know in the 2008 financial crisis, there were, big rises in gambling, particularly in the lottery. I mean, I think we're still in the middle of this crisis now. So, I don't know if it will look exactly the same way, but it is something that we're worried about, and we're constantly kind of assessing the community, and asking, like how are getting an idea, trying to get an idea of like how are people who have been financially impacted, by this pandemic. Do you hear that any of them are gambling right now? Just to start getting an idea. Yeah.
I have a question, and because I'm listening, and I was trying to formulate it for a while, and I just want to know: are we only addressing the financial aspect of it, the monetizing? I bring it up because I grew up in a neighborhood where we play games like spades. And Venus, I think Venus knows what I'm talking about. And I'm asking, are we addressing the social emotional aspect of it, where it becomes aggressive and families break up just because of that game? There's nothing monetary being exchanged, but there's verbal abuse that happens there. There's sometimes physical abuse that happens in these games. So are we addressing both, or is it only the monetization of gambling?
I think it's both. I would say it's both because what you're talking about, Chevar, is the consequences of gambling. It's still value, even though there's no cash exchange. And the way we define gambling is when you risk something of value, right?
Okay.
And so when we, culturally, I don't play spades games.
Oh, me neither. I refuse to play spades. And
I don't
for those
participate.
reasons I just stated.
I'll play other types of games, but I feel like, for us in our community, it really gets serious. It really gets to another level. And the consequences behind it, it's not worth the game.
Absolutely not.
And it's very similar to IPV, intimate, like domestic violence. It's really similar in that because it's still in a home setting. You're fellowshipping with someone and you're trying to, bond, but then it turns off into a negative aspect. And so, yeah, we definitely address that because we do understand, like, when someone is struggling with gambling and they get with they suffer with withdrawal, they can become violent, they can become suicidal. And so we do look at the whole picture, and we do understand, like, value does not equate money. Young people gamble, people that are incarcerated, they gamble, they take risks. It's that same picture. For me, that's how I see it as a big coin.
No, thank you for clarifying, because like every time we talk, I hear monetizing, I hear the exchange of money, and I'm like, what about for me, it's like the other part, like those games, even dominoes or trouble. Like I've seen people get physically and aggressive over. I'm like, dude, it's just a game. In my mind, in Chevar's mind, it's just a game, But I do understand other people take things more serious than I would, But again, I just wanted to know how, or if there's activities or workshops you do on domestic violence or aggressive behavior or what have you. And what does it look like opposed to the exchange of money?
I'll let Ashley, because I think Ashley is working on the presentation. That's right up her alley.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you mentioned that, Chevar. I'm really glad that you brought up that question because absolutely all of those other things are part of the picture as well. And I think perhaps part of the reason that the financial aspect has come up a lot is because there is a financial crisis going on due to COVID, and that's kind of on the
Understandable.
forefront of people's minds right now. But
Mhm.
absolutely, I mean, there are so many factors that go into problem gambling and sustain the behavior that may not have anything to do, with being in um, any kind of financial crisis. And one of the things you brought up, Chevar, when you brought up the experience of witnessing people having really strong emotional reactions to losses in these games, that's actually a warning sign, that somebody could potentially have a problem gambling is their reaction to losses. So, even something, going back to what we were saying earlier, that people can, just kind of like, keep an eye out for, if they notice themselves or someone they care about, having those kinds of reactions to losses in games. That's an indicator that there could be a problem. And like Ronni said earlier, we don't want people to people have so much to worry about, right? Like, we don't want to give
Absolutely.
more to worry about, but at the same time, we want people to have the knowledge that they need to recognize patterns and people they care about. So like that's really a good example of what it could look like.
Yeah, and I just want to jump in there too, because so much of the disease of addiction, I will call it a disease because I suffer from it. And it's very real, it's very tangible. And I think that the thing with gambling, with the monetary part, is that that's the most obvious sign
Yeah.
that people see because it's the one that
Mhm,
affects everything else. The other parts we tend to stuff and not pay attention to, especially in close relationships. But I've seen so many people who maybe have suffered from the disease and it came out through drug misuse. And
Mhm.
then when they stop using drugs, their addiction switches. I mean, for me, when I got into recovery 23 years ago, I became addicted with the internet. I could, I was up all night in chat rooms talking to people, but I thought, okay, for now, that's a lot better than what I was doing. But it's not unusual for people who have a more addictive personality to move into different addictive behaviors,
No.
and or to have them exist together.
Mm.
So it's important, I think, for us to just be aware and know what to do, and know what to do as people who are loved ones and care about people, because we always talk about the person who's addicted, but we don't talk about the family members. So if somebody is noticing this trend within a family and they've spoken to the person and they've gotten nowhere, what can they do now to help within their own life, maybe their own recovery?
Ronni, can I just go back to what you said about the piece about recovery, please, for a second?
Yeah, of course.
One thing that I am seeing, one trend that I'm seeing, a lot of people in recovery are now turning to scratch offs.
Hmm.
So one of the things that we're noticing that we're seeing is like, gambling is sort of like a social norm to certain
Right.
people. It's not seen as an addiction. It's not seen as, something that can be harmful. So that's one of the things that we're seeing. And I did a presentation for the Bronx Peer Recovery, and they were so grateful because a lot of them didn't even realize that they were participating or on the verge of becoming a social gambler, you know? Um,
Wow.
and so this is why these conversations are really important, because what you said is really true. You know, you never know. Like if each culture, like I always say this, each culture has their own gambling origin story. And so that's really true when you start studying gambling, what it looks like in the Jewish community, what it looks like in the African American community, what it looks like in the Hispanic community, what it looks like in the Asian community. You'll see very different trends, but however, they're going the same way. And
Hmm.
it's all about escaping and getting out of poverty. Like Ashley said, it's like hope. Let me play these numbers so I can get hope. A scratch off is right here. If I buy one for $2 and I only win $2, I get another scratch off. So just to go back to that recovery, we're doing a lot of work with people in recovery and peers, because we're seeing this
Excellent.
trend of people who are just, subconsciously going in that way. And we do not want them to, fall in that disease cycle of being stuck again.
And I'm glad you mentioned that too, because I mean, the trend for the last decade or two has been to start working together in all three, what we call pillars. And New York State is finally starting to look at that. And when I lived in Maine, I was very involved in the grassroots recovery movement. And we tried to institute what we called a recovery oriented system of care, or ROSC. And that recovery oriented system of care brings recovery to every phase of from prevention to treatment to recovery. You involve recovery in all of it, because we often forget when a person is in recovery, there are other risks that are present. And we can't just forget to look for those. We need to look at the families too, because we have to realize that they need prevention just as much. So I think that what you're talking about is very timely. It's what we're doing here in New York State. It's what we need to continue to do, and just open all the doors and let everybody come together under the same tent and work together and fill those gaps.
Definitely.
So I'm glad you brought that up.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Ashley.
Ronni, I was just going to say, I can definitely speak a little bit more to your question about, family members, and what, family members can do if they are concerned about a loved one. So in New York City, about half of the calls that come to our resource center are from concerned family members. A lot of spouses, some parents, particularly parents of young adults and college age students. So we have structured our program so that anybody who is not only struggling with their gambling behavior, but impacted by the problem gambling of a loved one, can get help for it. And what that means in very concrete terms is that, say I am somebody who is the spouse of somebody who has a problem gambling. Say that spouse is not ready to go to treatment, but it's destroying my life, and I don't know what I'm going to do about the marriage and all of the impacts of it. As somebody who's a loved one impacted by problem gambling, I would, there's a couple things that we can offer, impacted spouses. One is they would be eligible for the same benefits to see a therapist as the identified problem gambler is. And even though there are, therapy is not going to solve everything, it is a big help, in the lives of impacted family members, because they can, learn about things like, setting boundaries, codependency, they can help kind of get their own clarity about, if what they can do to keep themselves as well as possible, until the spouse is ready to go to treatment. Sometimes, the spouse, the impacted or the person who is the problem gambler does join the spouse or the family member in treatment. It may just take them a couple months, right, to get in. And so the work that we do with impacted family members is really important. And, when we, basically the way our program works is we train and recruit therapists who have an existing private practice. We train them on best practices in treating problem gambling. And part of their training is specifically about, evidence-based ways to work with significant others and how to help significant others, particularly anybody who shares or is dependent on finances, with the identified person with the problem gambling, to work on things like, managing debt and things like that. I mean, obviously that's not the therapist's expertise, but they're trained on like how to address that from like a therapeutic purpose and, for therapeutic purposes, and to know, what resources are available to them. So they get a little bit more training in some of the concrete stuff. And they get, they can use the existing expertise, from working with significant others to really help this person in, okay, how can how can you keep yourself as healthy as possible, while this has happening? And it's been really, really useful for the families that come to us. We also try to develop, maintain relationships with people who are locally involved in Gam-Anon, which is like Al-Anon, for people impacted by problem gambling, and Smart Recovery, also has some meetings for, family and friends. I think you guys are probably all familiar with Smart, but for listeners who might not be familiar, Smart Recovery is a peer support group open to anybody struggling with any kind of addiction. So not specific to gambling, but gambling inclusive, and certainly useful for people in recovery and their families.
Well, it wasn't a question I have. It's more of a statement based off what you guys both, Ashley and Venus, said when you talked about the disease of hope. I'm listening in Venus talking about the money, and I could see why people would get addicted, because it becomes instant gratitude. Like once you have that money, you believe it fixes everything at that moment. So I think that's, for me, that's where I'm seeing the instant gratitude with that phrase, or which I like, disease of hope, which I appreciate. And I thought it was a really good way of summing it up and calling it and naming it that.
Yeah. I can relate to that too. I mean, anytime I've bought a lottery ticket, and I don't buy them very often, I'm already spending it in my mind. Okay, if I win the lottery,
it's that
what
instant
will I do?
gratitude.
Yeah, you start, I mean, in my head, I always think of how I'm going to do it. So I keep away from that because I know who I am. And I've had a long-term recovery, but I could see how easily it would be get sucked into that, especially during hard times. We need hope, but there are other ways to find it, which is actually what we're talking about before you guys got here.
Yeah, that you made me think about office pools, and when they do what is that, the football Super Bowl, like in organizations, they do
like March Madness and stuff like that. Yeah.
If we win this, we're quitting tomorrow, and I think there was a story where an office did win and everybody quit. So
sorry.
There is a thing of hope. And also, like, I'm reading this book, Running the Numbers, by Matthew Voss. He is a CUNY professor, I think City, and he talks about just race, gambling, and he opens the story by saying that Colin Powell, I believe, his family, they lived in the Bronx. They were from the Bronx. However, they played a number. His father played a number, and they won like $5,000. When the family won $5,000, they moved to Queens to a house. And so, I think for me personally, in my role, I'm very careful not to offend people, because I do understand, like, if you can't give them an alternative, people are living in poverty. So I'm never going to say, gambling is bad, or don't do it. What I will say is, it can be addictive. Here are the warning signs. Watch out for this. So again, like you said, Chevar, a lot of people are just looking for a way out. And I think that's just from all cultures. We just want more. We feel like we deserve more, which we do.
Wish I could buy a house for $5,000 in Queens.
Right?
I remember when you could.
Yeah.
I'm on my way to Queens right now.
And I think that hope is that's like the initial hook, I think, that brings people in, that gets people started. But what actually sustains the behavior is, like what we mentioned earlier, there is a rush of chemicals called dopamine that happens in the brain, when not even necessarily when the win is had, but even right after the bet is placed, and because of various
rush.
It's that rush, exactly. And because of various, factors, some people are more vulnerable to how they respond to that rush than others. So, even though it's like that hope and that winning that draws people in, what ultimately sustains people is wanting to feel that excitement all over again. And if somebody has difficulty resisting those urges to feel that excitement, like that's when it kind of starts crossing the bridge into problem gambling. And that's where we want to step in and, help people just identify, what it looks like and let people know what their options are for help.
Yeah.
Okay, now if people want to get in touch with you, because I hate to say this, but we're at that wrap-up point. This has been such a great discussion today. So of course we're going to have you back. You know that. But how can they get in touch with you both? And we'll make sure it goes in the comment section too on YouTube. But
Okay.
how can they get in touch with you?
So the Bronx Hotline is 929-222-9566. And that's just a hotline for people who are struggling with gambling. Like Ashley said, a lot of times it's not even the person with the issue that's calling, it's majority the family. So we like to make sure that, people are well aware of the hotline. My email is vmore@nyproblemgambling.org. And even if you want to reach out to me, I have a lot of people who reach out to me directly, and then I just make sure that they get help. So I'm not that type of person to say, no, call the hotline. No, you can reach out to me, and I would just make sure that you can get the help and the services that you need.
Venus, can you spell more, please? Because your more is spelled differently.
You're right. MOORE. MOORE.
Just like you see it on the screen right now,
Yeah.
too. But if you're listening and not watching, you wouldn't know that. So thank you, Venus.
Mm-hmm.
And what about you, Ashley? How can they contact you?
Yeah, so I have a really long email because of my former last name, but but you can honestly, if you guys our email. So actually, maybe I can. This is not going to work. Okay, so let me. I know you guys will put this all in the chat, but if you go to nyproblemgamblinghelp.org. That is the website for all of the resource centers throughout New York State. And if you go to that website, you'll see a little map, and you can just click on the area that you want to find the contact for the resource center for in that area. So that's where you'll find the numbers. And when you click on New York City, you can click on each of the boroughs. So again, that's nyproblemgamblinghelp.org. You'll see the number for all of the resource centers, and our citywide email address that you can email and it'll get triaged out to any of us is New York City PGRC at nyproblemgambling.org. I'll repeat that. New York City PGRC at nyproblemgambling.org. So you can send an email to there and ask to be connected with any of us or any of the local resource centers directly. Also follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We're on Facebook at NYC PGRC, and we are on Instagram as New York City PGRC. And I'm the social media geek out of all of us. So if you want to contact me, message one of the pages, and it will probably be me that gets back to you. So yeah.
And we'll do some posts with NYC Pop. We'll definitely get in touch with you about maybe devoting a couple of weeks to that in the near future, because we haven't done many posts about gambling or any. So I think it's time.
Yeah. Let's work together.
Well, we'd like to end on a fun note. Venus has experienced this with us, but you may have a different answer this time. You can repeat the same. What did you want to be when you were growing up?
I'll let Ashley go first. I went through a phase.
I mean, there were a couple different things, but most consistently and most passionately, I wanted to be an actress.
Nice. Oh,
Yeah.
I think for me, I just wanted to be successful, to be honest, because I really I'm dyslexic, and I was just really struggling with school. And so I went through this phase of this, and that. And I think for me, overall, I just wanted to be successful and help people, because I thought I was not going to be, because what I saw around me in my neighborhood.
Wow, you smashed all, low expectations anyone had of you, and you have realized that in a major way.
Oh, thank you.
I'm very blessed to be watching a part of that process, but
Yes.
Cool.
Ronni-
Well, now,
Ronni
now,
helped move me.
what- you already had it. I just gave you the chance. Now, Norm, we're going to ask you that question. What did you want to be when you were growing up?
I also had different phases, but one of the strongest was being a lawyer to save the world. But yeah, to
Cool.
defend people. Yeah, but then that didn't work out. I went to a better place.
What?
I went to development and working with communities, which it's one of my
That's what you're
passions.
doing.
Yeah,
There-
it is.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I wanted to be a famous rock star, and I haven't given up on that yet. So
No.
No, don't give up.
I remember Venus
Awesome.
watching one of my performances once and said, "You need to change professions." When I was playing the blues. But anyway, Chevar, you want to chime in there?
Sure. Really quickly, when I was 7, I remember saying I wanted to be a NASCAR driver and a firefighter. I have no idea why. In proximity, there's no NASCAR in Harlem, so I thought because the cars were really fast, I thought they were cool as a kid, and then realizing older, like I would never. That was not in my life. But I also wanted to be a spy and/or like some sort of like space explorer. Like I wanted to go in space. I still do want to go in space. That's just me.
Well, now we know a little bit more about each other. And I just when you thought you knew everything. But I want to thank you both for coming and joining us today. And I'm afraid this is the point we have to say goodbye. We're going to stick around a little longer, but thank you again. And this was chocked full of so much.
Thank you. And welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll see you soon. Take care.
All
Our
right.
season.
See you.
Bye.
Bye. All right. Oh my God, that was so interesting.
Okay.
I had like
yes.
1,000 more questions, but I held off. I mean, it was good information. Like, I just wanted clarity on certain things, which, they cleared up. Just because a lot of times we hear one portion of it where, like they said, sometimes the other part gets neglected because in the
Mhm.
forefront is this, which is the money, the monetizing. We don't see the other parts, which I'm glad they're addressing. And when they come back, I have more questions. I'm writing them down.
Sounds good. I think you should, because we will have them back again. Well, this is the end of the show for today. Thank you for watching The Solution and listening to The Solution. If you're on YouTube, just look below you, or actually it's to the right, it's the lower part of the screen, and subscribe
Yes.
to our channel, because we try to do one every week or every couple of weeks. But thank you so much for joining us today on The Solution. Nothing changes if we change nothing. Take care. Peace out.